Good evening, everyone. I'm Anne Havard. I'm a member of the SLN core group, and it's my privilege this evening to welcome you all to the second session of our Advent journey, Forced to Leave, No Room in a Foreign Land. The theme of this whole journey is forced like Jesus Christ to flee. And it's the theme that Pope Francis chose for this year's World Day of Migrants and Refugees. And the message that he wanted to get over was that we needed to seek to know and understand those who are forced to flee, like Jesus Christ.
When we talk about migrants and displaced persons, all too often we stop at statistics. But it's not about statistics. It's about real people. If we encounter them, we will get to know more about them. And knowing their stories, we'll be able to understand them.
And now we're going to listen to a powerful rendition of a traditional Christmas carol, O Come, O Come.
O come, Emmanuel, and ransom captive Israel, that mourns in lowly exile here, until the Son of God appear. Rejoice, rejoice, Emmanuel shall come to thee, O Israel. O come, thou King of David, come and open wide our heavenly home. Make safe the way that leads to thee, and close the path to misery. Rejoice, rejoice, Emmanuel shall come to thee, O Israel. O come, thou rod of Jesse, stand from every foe, deliver them that trust thy mighty power to save, and give them victory o'er the grave. Emmanuel shall come to thee, O Israel.
A fire, something we instinctively reach out to. We talk about hearth and home, the fireplace, the place where we gather with others, a place of warmth, of acceptance, of companionship. But those who live on the streets have no fireplace. This summer during the pandemic, there was an unprecedented move to bring them indoors. But now we're in winter. The temperature has dropped. Warmth is essential. We still see them huddled in the street, but too often we pass by them or look over them. But these are the people where Christ is found waiting for us. We're now going to listen to some words from Thomas Merton, whose anniversary happens to be today.
Into this world, this demented inn, in which there is absolutely no room for him at all, Christ comes uninvited. But because he cannot be at home in it, because he is out of place in it, and yet he must be in it, his place is with those others for whom there is no room. His place is with those who do not belong, who are rejected by power because they are regarded as weak, those who are discredited, who are denied the status of persons, tortured, exterminated. With those for whom there is no room, Christ is present in this world. He is mysteriously present in those for whom there seems to be nothing but the world at its worst.
Right now, it's my pleasure to introduce our guest for this evening, Danny Sweeney. Most of Danny's work has been done with young people throughout the world, in Wales, India, China, Malawi, France, England. He has worked with vulnerable young children, asylum seekers, survivors of modern slavery, with street children, and with child soldiers. In 2016, he was in France, where he accompanied young families and unaccompanied children from Calais to Toulon after the demolition of the jungle. In 2017, he worked with Justice and Peace Scotland and went back to Calais, organising and leading other volunteers in dealing with the border crisis. For over 10 years, Danny has been a lay volunteer with the Salesians of Don Bosco, and as part of their youth ministry, he was involved in their Voldoco summer camp project. I probably haven't pronounced that correctly, providing a holiday experience for young asylum seekers and refugees. And when he is not doing all that, Danny likes singing and he plays his guitar, though perhaps you might not like to listen to that. He plays rugger and he goes in for martial arts. So clearly he is not someone to mess with. However, you are welcome, Danny. Over to you.
Thanks, Anne. Yeah, possibly one of the few members of the sort of non-violence movement who's a martial artist. I don't know. Thanks to the full group for inviting me to come this evening and to sort of accompany Scottish Laity Network on this sort of journey of this Advent series. But I can't separate, and I don't really try to, my personal feelings, my faith from my experiences in this field of work, particularly around migration, or in any of the work that I do. You know, I never stop saying I feel very lucky. I love my job. I get to advocate on important issues, and I get to do it from within our church and for our church. So hopefully tonight will be a mix of informing, awareness raising, reflecting on what I've seen and done in the last few years. I'm going to start with sort of my journey, my journey to Scotland has very much run through Calais, with some of the people I've met. And I also want to highlight some of the things that have happened here in the UK and ways that we can take more action. And obviously after I've talked, we can pick up on sort of bits and pieces of this in the chat if people want to know more. So host, to start setting the scene, I saw Alison's amazing sort of session, the sharing she did last week, and she spoke a little bit about the camp in Calais, what was known at the time as the jungle and now the old jungle. This video I'm about to show, it's a reflection that I use, or I used to use when I could do workshops in schools with students. The footage is taken from the jungle before 2016. And the words of the reflection are read by a mixture of volunteers and also those who were living in the jungle.
Open up the border. Open up the border door. Open up the border. Open up the border door.
Take a walk in their shoes and try to understand.
Home is not just about a roof and a muddy piece of land.
Home is about a family.
And the ones they took away.
Swept up by the seas.
And the endless warring days. Take a walk in their shoes and see their pain and scars. The suffering behind them and the trucks that just drive past.
Take a walk in their shoes.
The steps they've had to take to make it across the ocean.
To try to change their fate.
Take a walk in their shoes
and try to understand.
Home is not just about a roof and a muddy piece of land.
Think about the fact
that you wouldn't just run away.
Of course you wouldn't do it.
Unless you couldn't stay.
Take a walk in their shoes
and see their pain and scars.
The suffering behind them.
And the trucks that just drive past. Take a walk in their shoes.
The steps they've had to take.
To make it across the ocean.
To try and change their fate. Do you think you'd choose to live
in a makeshift home of wood?
Surely you would stay at home.
If only you actually could. And yet you'd find them smiling as they greet you to say hello.
Volunteers there every day.
They come
and then they go.
Take a walk in their shoes.
Standing together side by side.
Only one born in a country, not actually experiencing the fight. So people won't you listen.
Governments want you here.
There's a humanitarian crisis.
And it's happening far too near. Jump on board a ferry. Tunnel under the sea.
Just find a place in your heart.
Of where you think they'd rather be. Take a walk in their shoes.
And join them by the shore.
Please help them find a home.
Just stop the senseless war.
So I never want to condescend or talk down. I also never want to assume that people have knowledge that they don't. So to try background, perhaps what I'm talking about, the jungle was the name given to the settlements just north of Calais, unrecognised by the French, not an official refugee camp, not an official place of aid, an unofficial site. And it grew up through 2015 into 2016. In summer 2015, it's believed there was around, give or take, 3,000 people living in the area. By the following summer in 2016, that had become 10,000. I'm hoping this works. This first shot is early in 2016. The second shot, which hopefully is fading through now, this is late October. This was the end of the jungle. And if you see them side by side, slightly different angles, but if you take the lake as your point of reference, you can see a village, a town of 10,000 people was destroyed pretty much overnight. And on the far side of the lake is the white cabins, the UNHCR cabins. I know Alison spoke about where some were moved, but not all. At its peak, 10,000 people were believed to be living there. Some were seeking to come to the UK to claim asylum in their own right. Some wanted to claim where they had a family network or to join members of their family already here. What was never reported in the press or even since, around 3,000 people there were trying to claim asylum in France. But the French system, not fit for purpose, and I don't apologise for saying that, it was dragging on. People felt they were getting no hope, and word got out saying, go to Calais. There are people there, you can get attention, you can get help there. And ultimately, the crisis of hospitality in Europe led to 10,000 people living on what is an abandoned waste dump, that area. There is all sorts buried under that soil. Next little clip I'm going to show you, it's how you go from the top picture to the bottom picture in a matter of days.
Unfortunately, the video clip that I showed has been identified as a copyright violation and is not allowed to be included in the YouTube recording. Apologies.
So I think that clip, you get some sense of the chaos, the confusion, and the destruction that was taking place. And for me, this was really where my involvement with all this started. For the previous 2.5 something years, I'd been a civil servant. I worked in the Home Office in Leeds and then in Sheffield in the asylum case, work on modern slavery, and latterly I was running my own team, sort of doing interview work and a few other things. But the Monday that it mentions there, that Monday I wasn't in Calais, and I wasn't at my job in the Home Office. I was up here. I was in Glasgow, and I was interviewing for this job I now have with Justice and Peace Scotland, and it sticks with me. I sat in the bar in the hotel having a coffee, waiting to go around the corner to my interview, and I was watching this as it unfolded on the news. Humanitarian disaster happening in real time with ad breaks. And it came up in my interview. I think the question, it was something like, what would you say are the most pressing, issues of social justice? And I think I said something like, have you seen the news this morning? And so either that was an amazing answer that secured me the job, or it wasn't bad enough to rule out everything else I'd done. I've never actually asked which way that coin flip went. But a couple of days after that interview, Monsignor Hugh Bradley, who was the General Secretary at that time, called, offered me the job. I accepted, and I was sort of set. It was a new move, a new challenge, pack your bags and head north. But before I could say goodbyes to my team, and something happened. And we'd known that the government was talking about assisting the French authorities with the destruction of the camp, with the disbursement of the people. And then I went out asking for people to be there. I mean, literally sort of flying the flag, notionally as a show of good faith, of trust, so that people in the jungle would see British officials were part of this process, that they weren't being lied to. Of course, they were being lied to. It was part of a con. It was the lie to sell this to them. There was a very, very slender, very small list of types of asylum claim of people, of profiles that would be considered and would be being transferred to the UK. Everyone else, as you saw, was just being dispersed across France. And it was, just out of sight, out of mind. We want to get rid of this problem. But as a result, one morning got a call from my boss, and from across the country, several hundred of us were shipped over first to the south of England, and then over to Dover, to Calais, to Dieppe, to Dunkirk, to be part of this. And after that week, what remained of the camp was the UNHCR, the white cabins, and the area around there, and unaccompanied minors, unaccompanied children, and also young families. So parents or parent with very young children had been sort of kept back from the dispersal that first week. I could say all sorts about this time, and what sticks out to me, the picture that's on screen, the Eritrean church that was built in the jungle. This was left standing. So even after most of the jungle had been bulldozed, this was still there. while we were in France, the sort of small team of 4 that I'd been assigned to, we were staying in Dieppe. But overnight on the Tuesday night, we'd learned that tensions between some of the groups of young men had flared up, exacerbated, of course, by everything that had been happening that week. And several Eritrean lads had ended up having to shelter in the church for fear of an attack, for fear of their lives, when everything kicked off and boiled over. We'd heard that, and then a couple of hours later, we drove sort of along the side of the camp. And as we drove in, I saw the church pulled down, and I recognised the shape. I'd seen it on the TV, and that has stuck with me. I tend to keep notes when I travel and sort of when I've been abroad and stuff. And I wrote, seeing this, the whole idea of sanctuary, that almost medieval idea of seeking sanctuary in the church, that, the word that comes from the sacred space around the altar, and the words of the prophet Ezekiel, who the message that he gives to the Israelites in exile. But I, the Lord, I have still been a sanctuary for them during this time in those other lands where they have gone. And it was even this sort of blasted wasteland that was now the jungle. Watching that church be pulled down, that was final for me. That was the moment after various bits of the camp had been cleared and moved over the sort of previous year. Everything, the community, everything that had grown and developed there, that moment was so final. People were pushed out, and the problem was declared to be over. I mentioned that I volunteer a lot with the Salesians of Don Bosco, and actually I wrote about this a couple of months after it happened. They were asking for accounts of volunteers who'd been involved with a BOVA, Bosco Volunteer Action, which is the International Volunteers Programme. So this is something I wrote about that time. I wrote this in February of 2017, so about 2 or 3 months later. The 17-hour bus ride from Calais to the reception centre in Toulon, the group of Afghani unaccompanied asylum-seeking children and half a dozen young families, required every bit of the Salesian spirit that I could find. In a job which had disheartened me by the bureaucratic indifference and political hostility to asylum seekers, I found in a place of naked aggression and racism, on a bus under police escort, with French officials ignoring the Afghan passengers completely, that all I had experienced of communicating, engaging young people, and trying to share a little of the love which characterises the charism of Don Bosco, St. John Bosco, and the Salesian mission came into play. Conversations were held in broken English and French, and as I had in India years before, I asked the boys to teach me to count to 10 and to speak a few other words and phrases in Dari, their native language. Juggling balls, still in my rucksack after volunteering on one of our summer camps a few months before, were brought out, and a marker pen turned several pairs of latex gloves, cannibalised from our Home Office issued first aid kit, into chickens for the youngest children. One was still holding his when we said goodbye at 2 a.m. at their new accommodation. It wasn't just the idea of joy with young people which I found. It was a renewed understanding of commitment to challenge injustice. When we were loading the bus in Calais, 2 of the young boys had bikes with them, gifts from one of the charity or educational programs which had begun in response to the need in the jungle. The driver of the coach and the French official in charge were refusing to allow them to load the bikes, ordering that they be left behind. While to the adults, these bikes were just more baggage, to the boys, they had a great significance as gifts from the volunteers they had befriended in the camp, and I suspect even more significance due to all the uncertainty and change taking place. Interfering, possibly another Salesian trait, possibly another Christian trait. I spoke with the officials on the boys' behalf. There was plenty of room under that bus. When I was told no, and that these children had no right to stolen toys, I found my defiance. I informed the official and the driver, if they refused, then I would have the bikes loaded into the Home Office support vehicle, the car we had bought from Dover with 2 colleagues in it. And either way, these boys would have their bikes in Toulon. As this was discussed in angry, gesticulating French, my team leader, a far senior member of the civil service, wanted to know what I was doing. He received the same explanation as the French officer. Was all this the wisest move in a tense multi-agency operation? Perhaps not. But in the end, the little victory was ours. The boys' bikes were loaded on the bus. I keep the memory of their faces when we unloaded them in Toulon. A small moment of hope in a very dark week's work. For transparency, I should say that less than a week before these events, I had interviewed and been successful in gaining a new job, a letter of resignation already on my manager's desk. But I hope that I would have done the same, even if the vague threats of sanction or disciplinary action had held any weight for me at that time. The end of the jungle wasn't the end of the story. And this next clip picks up where the politicians, the press, and the media attention left off.
We thought the jungle was bad. The jungle was bad, but now it's worse.
Police are come, breaking everything. Every day they are coming.
The crisis is that people are having to take these massive, crazy risks.
8 hours in the ocean. All of my friends said, we will dead. Hey, sure.
In October 2016, French authorities demolished the makeshift refugee camp known as the Jungle. Only 20 miles across the Channel from the UK, it was home to an estimated 10,000 refugees and migrants fleeing brutal conflicts and economic hardship around the world. Thousands of refugees were relocated around France. However, many remained, and a steady stream of new arrivals means that there are still thousands dispersed on the coast of northern France and Belgium. Without any permanent camp, conditions have worsened and pushed many people to increasingly risky methods of reaching the UK. As UK border patrols in the Channel increase, amid reports of a rise in people using dinghy boats to reach UK shores, we wanted to find out more about the situation around Calais today. Hous, an Iraqi Kurd, is sleeping rough in an industrial area near Dunkirk. Like many of those trying to reach the UK, he wished to remain anonymous, fearing being identified would impact on his future asylum claim.
We are in this place for 1 month. We moved here because the police are, every day they come to there and told us, go away, you can't sleep here. And you have no other place to go. In the night, we are going to try to get into Britain, you know. Everyone doing that. We doing all the parkings, yeah. In the day, police are come, breaking everything, taking us to the depot center. Every day they are coming, every day. Everyone knows the danger of the trucks, but you have to try. There's no way, because we haven't any money to go to inside the truck. Some of people are rich and they're giving 6,000, 5,000 pounds for that, but I haven't. What I can do? Just go to the Axel or go to the Shansi, like that. In Kurdistan, there's war and there's no opportunity to live. In UK, some nephew and my uncle is living there. Yeah, that's why.
At its peak, the jungle was crazy. There were up to 10,000 people at the highest point, we were told. The camp got broken up and disbanded. The situation was deliberately to disperse people all over France. Now that we don't have a main camp in Calais, everybody's sleeping rough. They're sleeping under bridges or in parks or in just bits of scrappy woodland. They have to hide from the police, so they're scattered. The police are so aggressively moving people on.
No.
They take their possessions, they trash stuff in front of them, they take their shoes, they take their phones, they spray their tents or their sleeping bags with pepper spray so they can't be used again. Their idea is that if they treat them badly enough, they'll go away. But where are they going to go? They can't go back, they can't stay here, they have nowhere to go. So this idea of just treat them as badly as you can and make them feel unwelcome, it's almost just like bullying, it's nothing else. Care for Calais has a couple of roles. Our main and obvious one is to deliver direct aid to the refugees, so clothes, food, sleeping bags and tents. We also feel it's very important just to spend time with them because of this hostile environment, if you like, that the French have, trying to make them feel unwelcome, make them feel dehumanised. You know, we've still got around about 3,000 refugees across the north of France. There are probably 4 or 5 main sites in Calais where people come together. The only time they come together is for the food distributions. Conditions are horrific. People are really suffering just from the effects of living outside all the time, continual cold weather, lots of coughs and colds, skin infections, foot infections, depression, despair. So we try and spend time with them and drink tea with them, do the haircuts, things that make them feel a little bit more human, a little bit more dignified.
That was filmed in early January of 2019, but does capture very much what has happened since the camp was demolished. The authorities have doubled down on everything. It is impossible to put up a tent. The policing operation is tens of millions of euros a month. It's a hostile environment in every sense of that word. Knowing this was going on, I wanted to do something. I'm not someone who believes that God takes an active interest in the minutiae of my life. But at the same time, having interviewed the day that the jungle was destroyed and that this kept coming back to me, you're either very brave or very foolish to try and ignore something like this. So later in 2017, the first step perhaps to trying to get this on the agenda to raise the profile of this, I took Bishop William Nolan, Bishop of Galloway, president of JMP Scotland, took him down to Calais for a week or so. We were guests of Maria Skoptsova Catholic Worker House, a house of hospitality in the Catholic worker tradition. We invited Bishop Paul McLean from England to join us for a day as well. We wanted to give a lead. The church was not talking about this. Individual churches were doing things, but the church, the hierarchy, the power, where the power lies was not. So we went down for a few days. And again, there's all sorts I perhaps could say about this. But it sort of fired in me. We wanted to do more. We wanted to take volunteers. This was not an event. Bishop Nolan told me, this is not a thing we were doing to have it done. This was the first step, and he wanted to see something come out of this. And I wanted to respond myself as well. It fired something in me. I wanted to perhaps go a bit deeper. So a few months later, I volunteered at Skoptsova House. So for 2 weeks, I lived in a house of hospitality amongst refugees. St. Maria Skoptsova, who some I'm sure will know, some may not, is actually a Russian Orthodox saint born in Riga in Latvia now, but Russian Empire at the time. Martyred in Ravensbrück, served in France between the wars as a place of hospitality for refugees and others. And when she was glorified in the Orthodox Church, one of the people there was the French cardinal, Jewish by birth. And so for her work in saving Jewish children, he included her in the canon of saints in the French Church, and through the universality, I think we can claim her as well. So I spent a few days, a couple of weeks living at this house where really you give whatever is asked. And again, terrible millennial that I am, I sort of post a lot of this stuff on Facebook. So I'm just going to read what I wrote at the end of my time, the end of the couple of weeks I spent at Skoptsova House. So this would have been in late October, early November of 2018. Days spent in Calais, seeing the front line of our government's callous disregard for young lives. When politicians play to the right wing and worst attitudes of our politics and speak of swarms and hordes, it reinforces that they have never bothered to meet the people they demonize for political gain. It's a privilege to visit Maria Skoptsova House, to sit, chat, joke, discuss politics, football, religion, and 100 other things in a mix of English, Tigrinya, French, F1 patiently thinking and rethinking for the right words to express meaning and hope we're being clear enough. To sit and learn new card games, give ad hoc guitar lessons, hear stories. Be inspired by the positivity and attitude of those who have been through severe hardship, persecution, extorted for money, but refuse to be broken. See quieter moments of doubt, when the long-awaited chance still hasn't materialized, and as the temperature drops and the rain comes, face the prospect of another winter outside. To ask how broken ankles are healing, ribs and arms from police beatings, eyes still recovering from tear gas. To hear the doorbell ring, a 17-year-old coughing and in pain, wearing a mask due to the risk of contagion, but denied a hospital bed. We find room and the hope that with warmth, food, compassion, and some stability, he will recover. Share in the kitchen new recipes and ways of cooking, crowd round the table with mismatched plates, and chat again. The doorbell rings again, shuffle round, grab another plate. There is always space for one more. To walk out in the cold morning, to where many more sleep rough. New fences are being built. Soon the site will be closed, like under the bridge and near the hospital, the old shopfront which used to provide some small shelter. French riot police circle past within minutes of our arrival. It couldn't be clearer that we're not welcome. Share the hot tea, bread, eggs, and tins of fish. Inside, commit to keep smiling. Be glad to see everyone and let them see your friendly face. While inside, heartbroken at the sight of cold, wet, dirty clothing, all they have. Furious that my taxes are squandered by a government I loathe to build the hostile infrastructure that makes it this way. Stand in the front room, which is our chapel, and hear prayers in ancient sacred geese. Another generation praying for liberation and hope. 1,000 times more holy than the hollow platitudes of the vicar's daughter or the Latin mass fanatic who parade their personal piety for gain, but vote against the poor at every opportunity. Now sit on the train in the tunnel, a passport giving in seconds what many in Calais risk all for. 80 years after the Kinder transport, when a nation on the brink of war opened its doors to the needy and vulnerable, we ignore. Hashtag, it's our turn. It's our turn to make a longer table, not a higher wall. I can't remember what Theresa May, the vicar's daughter, or Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Latin mass fanatic, had done that week to incur my ire, but it must have been something. So from all this, having been, I was in a place to perhaps accompany others. And so at the start of 2019, we organised a pilot across Scotland with volunteers, travelled to Calais for a few days. There's all sorts of stories I could tell from this time, but I think they are these volunteer stories. It's different when you're watching people take part in this. I've done it a couple of times now. Had 2020 been a bit more normal, we would have done it several more times, hopefully soon. It's amazing to see how people respond. I never grow tired of just seeing the shock that people feel when they see the conditions and just how much work is put in. This is the Care for Calais warehouse, packing bags, sorting supplies, getting everything ready to go out in the afternoon to do distributions. What I can say for myself, a thing I'd not done really when I'd been before, I've sort of normalized the situation in Calais. I would not say it's normal, but I have normalized it and I'm used to it. With Care for Calais, one of the places they support, and in the pictures here, this is the centre of Brussels. We're in the heart of the big business, big government district. And I'm going to let the words go to one of my volunteers, brother at the time, now Father Anthony from the Passionists.
Hi, I'm Brother Anthony Conley. I belong to the Passionist congregation. I travelled down on Tuesday with a group from Justice and Peace Scotland to visit and to help the Care for Calais charity here. We're standing in Brussels, in the centre of Brussels at the moment, where some several hundred refugees from all parts of Africa, I think, have been receiving food and clothing distribution. It's freezing cold right now. They're desperate to get into the UK. some of them pleading us to take them with us. It's heartbreaking, really is heartbreaking, just that we can't offer them any other assistance. And so that's it. We're here till Saturday, and God bless.
I think if nothing else, this was shot on my phone, and you can hear the wind. I feel cold when I watch that video. I always do. I remember the cold there. When I went back a few months later with another group, at that time when we were there, when Brother Anthony and I were there, refugees were at least allowed to sleep in the underpass at the train station till 3 o'clock in the morning when it closed. The next winter, when I went back, even that had been taken away. Alison spoke last week, and I know people who've lived through this talk about the crisis in hospitality, and that crisis is getting worse. The last couple of reflections that I want to share before I sort of finish this bit and perhaps talk about more practical things and move on to wrap up this bit. There's a song which I want to sort of share with you. It's a singer-songwriter, a lady called Carrie Tree. It's called Human Kindness. She volunteered in Calais with Care for Calais as well. She was inspired to write this song after meeting a Syrian man. We're going to pull this bit together with listening to her words. There will also be a few images and a few passages of scripture for those who may prefer to look or to read something rather than listen. Just before that, I wasn't going to particularly read this, and I decided today to give another reflection that I wrote. I wrote this in 2018, probably not long after the time I'd been at Scops Over House. It was the 3-year anniversary of the death of Alan Kurdi, and I'm sure people know, and Alison spoke beautifully last week, the young boy whose image shamed David Cameron and the government into the refugee resettlement scheme. I think a few folk here will know that Justice and Peace Scotland, we have a constant need for blogs that we put out each week on the website. And when we're really struggling in an absolute pinch, I try to throw something together. So this is a reflection I wrote somewhere between poetry, commentary, and anger. It's called The Lonesome Death of Alan Kurdi. Tiny child lying dead on a beach. Not the first, not the last. Nothing remarkable. But for a few days, the world felt a shade more hospitable. Those who'd ignored or had not paid attention felt their hearts go out to one lost Kurdish Syrian. Shared on social media, pictures for likes. Some folk were genuine, some just virtue signaling. Some back with action. Give money, give time. This made me see, damn. Others back to photos of lattes on Instagram. Those who had spoke in fearful hysteria of swarms, infestations, invasions, stopped to shed their crocodile tears before going back to their usual headlines and their policies for fear. For a hostile environment, there's paperwork to be done. How I was deeply moved in politics becomes, let's move on. Gesture politics, let's do the bare minimum. It shouldn't hurt with our base and may even help us win again. Bring over a few thousand for just a few years and hope that everyone stops asking, cheers. A brief respite in rhetoric, but not for too long. They are still other, and we want them gone. Pay off other governments, not our obligation. We're helping where they are, means we'll do anything to stop them being part of our nation. A dinghy, overcrowded, not fit to float. But there's money to be made, no time to check the lifeboat. Alan Kurdi dead on a morning of fear. Unknown dead, still trapped in Syria. Unknown dead across the Med. Unknown dead under the wheels of European trains and lorries. Unknown beaten in Calais, Dunkirk. If it's cold, take their shelter. If it's hot, take their water. Unknown dead in Yemen. Bombs made in Britain, used by our allies. Please don't pay attention. A prophet saw once swords turn to plowshare, but there's profit to be had, and we've Brexit to pay for. Now 3 years on and the world has stopped caring. Aid must serve trade, and the far right is rising. Weak politicians plot how to get ahead. We haven't learnt to welcome the stranger. And many more are now dead.
Unfortunately, Danny's internet connection was a bit unstable at this point, but we were very fortunate that Anne Havard, our host for the evening, filled in so brilliantly until the connection was up again.
Danny, that is so much there you've given us to think about. When we saw the jungle pictures on the television, they were sanitized. What you've shown us tonight is far more what it must actually have been like there. And so there's so much to think about, so many images, many of them distressing, but also it was clear that these young people in the jungle, they were helping each other in a way that help that they didn't get from the authorities, neither the civic authorities nor the church authorities. And that is really very, very sad. You used one or two phrases, out of sight, out of mind. And I think that's something we need to think about. And also you talked about the problem that we haven't learned how to welcome the stranger. We'll be going to the chat in a few minutes. And Callum will organise that. Perhaps I could just start by thinking about welcoming the stranger, and the title of this talk, No Room for the Stranger. And I was thinking about the innkeeper, Mary and Joseph, arriving on the doorstep. And there's a story of a little boy in a primary school. And they were going to have a nativity play, and he very much wanted to be Joseph, but he was given the part of the innkeeper instead. And this upset him greatly. But anyway, they had the rehearsals, and the little boy bided his time, and they came to the day when they were having their performance, and all the parents and all the people were there. And Mary and Joseph came along to the inn, and the little boy said with a great smile, "Oh, please come in, there's plenty of room." And that made me think that this little boy was pointing out that actually we have choices. The innkeeper had a choice. He had three choices, in fact, if I think about it. He could have just thrown them out on the street, and he didn't do that. What he did was sort of park them somewhere else. He put them out in an outhouse. That was the second choice. I think that's possibly the choice that a lot of us take a lot of the time. And the third thing he could have done was to say, "Please come in, you can share my space." But he didn't do that. I mean, Mary was obviously heavily pregnant. A newborn is going to be a great upheaval. If you put them out in the outhouse, they're out of sight, out of mind. That seemed to me to be something that we need to think about. Are there questions in the chat?
Thanks,
Callum.
We lost Danny briefly, but Danny is back with us. So
Oh, Danny's back, right.
Yes, sorry about that. Greatest fear of a Zoom event is the internet deciding to give up.
Right, okay, Danny. Good, I'm glad you're back.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure when I was cut off.
It was
just that slide, that song, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, hopefully Calum's going to play the reflection with the words and the music.
There's more to this again. I see a war designed to never pretend. Something around amongst the shame, screaming at the bones. This is not in my name. I'm seeking kindness, I'm longing for safety, and I'm praying for hope. I'm craving compassion, I'm searching for sanity, I'm praying for hope. Been stripped in the boat. Home is where I can belong. Home is where our children grow strong. Home is where the fire burns low, and home peace can come from. And home's where peace can come from. I've traveled for months and thousands of miles. I fled the land that holds the heart of my king. And I know you see that the one state I'm in can't tell you my name or the places I've been. And I'm seeking kindness, I'm longing for safety, and I'm praying for hope. I'm craving compassion, searching for sanity, and I'm praying for hope. I've been stripped to the bone, and I'm praying for hope. Home is where we can belong. Home is where our children grow strong. Home is where fire burns low, and home is where peace can come from. And home is where peace can come from. And I'm praying for human kindness. And I'm praying for human kindness. And I'm praying for human forgiveness. And I'm praying for us all to belong. And they call me a migrant, and they call me a thief, and they call me a beggar, and asylum seeker. And I was once a teacher, I was once a family man, I was once a dreamer, a community leader. I've seen friends and family all scattered and broken, and we don't know why the cruelty keeps raging. And I'm seeking your kindness, I'm longing for safety, and I'm praying for hope. I'm craving compassion, searching for meaning. I feel so alone. I've been stripped to the bone, and I'm praying for home. Home is where we can belong. Home is where our children go strong. Home is where firemen belong. And home is where peace can come from. And home is where peace can come from. And home is where peace can come from. And home is where peace can come from.
Sorry about technical issues. Thank you, Callum, for picking that up. I do want to move to the chat. I don't want to, we've lost a bit of time. I think just, Callum, you can skip forward quickly for me a couple of slides to the one with Kev on it. Yeah. Valdocco, it's a summer camp for sound seekers. The idea for this, it came very much out of my return from Calais after being there with the Home Office. I came straight back to a meeting of our youth ministry team. The new provincial who just started in office was with us, and I said, I've seen this situation. I know what it's like over here. If we can do something for these kids, if I get a proposal to you, will you look at it? And he goes, "So get it done." There's a lot I could say, but this piloted in Liverpool, and again, people who want to know more, I can tell you. But I am so proud of it and of the team there. You can see the team's faces. You can't see the young people because obviously the photos. They knew they were taking them, but I didn't want to broadcast without checking up with them. The next photo is just a little memory. For long, complicated reasons, our planned accommodation for the team fell through, and we ended up in a very small flat. That's literally the whole of the living room, the dining room, the kitchen all together. Sort of 6 of us sharing a very, very small space for a week while delivering a summer camp. And one time during the week, Father Kevin, we had Mass. It was the Feast of the Transfiguration, and he picked up on the part of the passage from the Gospel, the reply from the disciples, "It is good we are here," and that's what Kev focused on, and that stuck with me. We were one of the kids taking part in our camp lived half a dozen doors down the road. Another one was the next road over from us. Most of the summer camps I've been involved in are away at a retreat centre. You're in beautiful countryside, and they're great. When we were putting this together, the provincial, Father Jerry, he did say, "I don't want you to do this in the middle of the countryside." I said, "I want you to go to where people are. I want you to be in the city with them." And he was so right. It is good that we were here. We lived alongside our young people in their neighbourhood for a week. And everything we did, nearly everything, we used the trains, we used the buses. We went to the places that they could go to if they had the chance. And these kids, they have nothing. The Home Office does not support families in the proper meaning of that word. They have nothing. They have no extras. We can't change policy. We can't change the government's mind on this stuff. But what we could do was give some kids a holiday. 2020. This was 2019. 2020. Obviously, COVID has happened, but we're hopeful that this will take off and will grow again. And again, if we can go on again, Callum, please. This is something I think some people will be aware of. It's community sponsorship. This was born out of when the government was shamed into accepting resettlement and said, we'll take 20,000 over 5 years, which is, when you break it down, not a lot. But that was done through the councils. And every council in Scotland has taken Syrians who've been resettled, and I think we should be rightly proud of that as a nation. This is slightly different. This is community groups who are doing the same. It's a big commitment. It's not nothing, but if we can go on again, Callum, it's churches, faith groups are doing this across the country. And I think if there's anything that we should be evangelical for in terms of what we can do to actively welcome the stranger right now, it is this in our communities. The information is on the website. The address is given there. Churches, community groups are good because you have a charity number. You have a registered number, and the Home Office can work with that. And there is support being given. And I can say more about this at a later date. And I think we should go to the chat before we lose any more time.
Well, thank you very much, Danny. I'll go straight into questions if that's all right. And our first question asks about particularly current circumstances. Pauline asks, what support is Care for Calais able to offer during this time of COVID?
Yeah, Care for Calais, again, it's worth Google them and go visit the website. They've remained in Calais all through the pandemic, sometimes a very small number of people, but they have remained, they've kept going, trying to do the distributions. Another group it is probably worth, if people want to learn more, having a look at, is a group called People Not Walls, who are a group UK and France who sort of are documenting this stuff. The situation in Calais is worse. The COVID, the pandemic, the restrictions have been used to further the hostile environment. Care for Calais are still there. They're also operating now much more in the UK. There are lots of local groups in England. I'm not certain if there are groups established in Scotland yet, but doing all sorts. The people being held at the barracks, sort of in Folkestone in Wales, Care for Calais are present and are going into these sites. I think about a week ago we heard that charities had to pull out because they were being threatened with the Official Secrets Act. And again, and they are involved with this. They're trying to find a way around it. I will just say, I was a civil servant. I never signed a copy of the Official Secrets Act. I was told, you take the job, you accept the consequences. It's an act of parliament, not a contract. You reading it or signing it makes no difference. You're still bound by it. So this intimidation of volunteers with the Official Secrets Act is a disgraceful move by the government. But Care for Calais are very much still on the ground in Calais and going out when they can. There's a big collection going on at the moment for winter coats, which are always needed. And there are groups operating in the UK that's come out of the pandemic. So certainly, if you're trying to find a way in or thinking of going yourself, they are a wonderful group to go with. You get thrown right in, and in the morning you'll be in the warehouse doing various tasks, and in the afternoon you will go out. It's frontline volunteering, and it partly when we were looking at our taking volunteers through Justice and Peace, that's what we wanted. In the very short space of time, you want to have that frontline impact, so people will come back and be inspired to take action. So they're worth having a look at, and they are very much still on the ground.
Thanks, Danny. The next idea picks up on what you were saying. This is a time to make a longer table, not build a higher wall. And if I can take two questions that echo those sentiments. The first from Monica: are you hopeful or despairing of our country's policies and practices? And from David, with the news today about a no-deal Brexit looming, will refugees and asylum seekers be given any welcome here in the UK at all?
I think I don't know about despairing. I'm insulted. I'm appalled at the actions of certainly the current and previous administration. Certainly under the current Conservative government, but by no means were Labour previously much better. We've never got this right. I mean, we have to try and be a people of hope as Christians, but I don't think it's going to come from the Home Office. We've seen over the summer the panic, the sort of hysteria over the small boat crossings that was whipped up, completely confected. The number, if you look at the numbers, people are taking small boats because the lorries, the previous very dangerous ways they were using, are no longer open. They're being forced to take even more dangerous ways. I think the Home Office trying, and I know the courts have slapped some of this down, but I'm sure we'll see it again, but trying to criminalize people on the boats, trying to criminalize the people who are driving. If you're in the hands of a smuggler, a trafficker, an agent is the term that the guys use, you have no agency of your own. You are not in control. You're doing as you're told. The fact that the Home Secretary thinks that I genuinely think that Priti Patel will not be happy until she's allowed to stand on a boat and gun the dinghies herself. It really does feel quite desperate. I don't see anything changing with the current government, particularly, unfortunately, and as of this time last year, that unassailable majority that they have, and I don't see members of parliament who have got the character or the guts to defy on these type of issues. It's probably not a surprise. I'm not impressed with the current crop of MPs. They seem a fairly spineless, compliant lot. So one thing I would say that I think people need to get far more engaged and active about is the idea of proportional representation. I never thought I'd be the person who cared about sort of constitutional, procedural issues, but actually, you know what, if we want to have a government that we can hold to account more than once every 5 years, we need to change that system in Westminster in particular. In terms of no deal Brexit, what do I think it's going to look like? I think the rhetoric is still rising. The government is playing to the worst elements of sort of UKIP and Britain First to secure their membership. One of the things that will be lost is a thing called the Dublin regulations, which is what allows for reunification of families, but also essentially says that the first European country that someone claims asylum in takes responsibility for the case. So you can't shop for asylum. If you raise an asylum claim in Italy, Italy should consider that claim. And it's not a perfect system. It has a lot of flaws, but our government has used this to send people back to Italy, to France, to Spain, to Sweden, to Germany, to other places when they've claimed they're either been unsuccessful or have not waited for an outcome. They've lost that ability. So their whole shtick about getting rid of people, which they seem to think is a badge of honor rather than a deep mark of shame, they've lost one of the tools that they can do that in their own short-sightedness. I'm not going to lie, and I can't pretend I have no positive idea. I think Brexit is an act of self-harm on a monumentally stupid level. And certainly I'm not happy that my ability to travel, to work, to live, to love across Europe is being robbed from me by a government that I don't really accept. I am very lucky. I have an Irish grandfather, and I need to start looking very seriously at that passport, because there's nothing good going to come out of this. It's populist, nativist, nasty racism. I'm not the thing that everyone who voted for Brexit is a racist, of course not. But this project is leading us down a very, very dark path. Yeah, I don't know if that answers, or if I need to get off the soapbox on that one.
If I can then take Kevin's question then, Danny, is it true that the French police that are dealing with the asylum seekers in Calais are funded by the UK government? That is, that the UK are paying France to keep them there?
Yes, with a qualification. I don't know all the current up-to-date details. Certainly 2014, 2015, 2016, there was massive British investment in infrastructure, support for the CRS, the French Riot Police operation. I think there is still a good deal of that. In January, February 2018, not long after Bishop Nolan and myself had been, we had what was sort of termed the Sandhurst Agreement between Theresa May, Prime Minister at the time, and President Macron, which was about this sort of, it was about funding, it was about infrastructure, it was about building walls and barriers. It was not about the asks, which I think are near universal from all the groups who are involved, which is for safe legal routes. And certainly Bishop Nolan and Bishop Paul, when the statement that they issued from their visit, we called for humane support for those living rough in the area. And again, none of that. So I believe there is still UK investment in the policing operation, the security operation around France. I don't know the details of it, so I wouldn't want to say further, though. And this is just me. I don't think anyone who actually works in this is saying it. But obviously there is the opposed border control at Calais. The UK border checks in France, French border checks are in the UK. I can't see why the French would keep that post-Brexit. I don't, the agreement you have with your close European friend and partner, I think is very different than what you will do for a country that spent the last 5 years causing chaos at your border and slagging you off at every chance it gets in the press. So my feeling is that there is some investment. I don't know the details, but I don't quite know how all that lasts beyond the sort of the chaos that we're going to see after December.
Thanks, Danny. Our next question, I think, is a particularly pertinent and important one. Charities in Scotland have been using the EU's refugee regulations to get the UK government to honour its responsibilities to refugees. And these same charities are really concerned, understandably, about what will happen after Brexit. What might you comment on that, Danny?
All I can say is that I share all those concerns. I think certainly I've benefited in some ways from being part of networks with. I've been to things in Europe. I've been to events at the Council of Europe. I know and I get the benefits of what this gives me. But I will at the same time say in school, in education, we've been very bad as a society of actually speaking about these benefits. It's always been the negative. So yeah, I share that. I don't know what the situation is. I think I listened to LBC, James O'Brien's radio show in the morning, and he was sort of saying with Theresa May, you could sort of predict what she would do because love her, loathe her, dislike her, whatever. You could sort of predict what she would try and do, perceived to be in the best interest of the goal she was after. Under Boris Johnson, it's almost impossible to predict because he could say one thing at 10 o'clock and deny it at 11. So it is impossible to say, and it is a great source of worry. I think we're going to lose an awful lot. We're set to lose an awful lot, and you don't know what you've got till it's gone.
Rab asks, what impact do you feel Bishop Nolan's visit had on the church in Scotland?
I suppose I may be the wrong person to ask because obviously I was involved. I was aware that obviously Bishop Nolan's the president. He's who I perhaps work with most closely amongst all the bishops. I'm aware of what he does. I'm aware of what it can do. I think certainly. I said at the time, I was half joking, but again, perhaps rooted in a place of truth. If I had gone as an employee of the Bishops' Conference as Justice and Peace Scotland, I may have been able to beg, borrow, or steal half a line in the Scottish Catholic Observer from a friendly journalist. If I take the bishop, you get the headlines, you get the awareness. There was coverage in the tablet, and I think it has started. We've seen. Certainly from the Bishops' Conference in England, from Bishop Paul, speaking with SFAR, Scottish Faith Action for Refugees, our friends at the Church of Scotland. Calais has definitely, I feel it's definitely further up the agenda, and it's certainly more fixed in the consciousness now than it was 3 years ago in 2017 when Bishop Nolan went. I know it had an impact on him. I'm not here to speak for him or put words in his mouth, but obviously, the Justice and Peace Sunday message goes out in January, and the one he put out in 2018, drew on his time in Calais. I know, and he's spoken in meetings and publicly about how what impacted him. So I think certainly on that personal level, it's made a change. And he again, I'm not here to sort of pour praise or kiss up to the boss. I do think very highly of him. I think he's wonderful. The way he engages with so many the broad scope of issues that our office does take in, and even I said it before. He himself said that visit to Calais that he did, that's not a thing we're doing. So he's visited. That was a starting point for raising awareness in schools, raising awareness in parishes, taking other groups of volunteers. Obviously, we've had a hiatus in 2020, but hopefully that will be back. So I think it has made a difference in that public sense. And if nothing else, it means that I know that at least one, and the others all are aware of this. We do update them. but even if they weren't, even if they were very hostile, we'd have at least one voice at the bishops' conference at the top table in our church in Scotland who is a passionate advocate for this. He's not the only one, and you know, I'm sure people know that, but so on that level, I think it does help, and it's so much in line with what the church is saying globally, with what we're hearing from Pope Francis. I think it can only be good that people hear it at every level. You know, we need to be hearing it from the Pope, from our bishops, from our priests, from the laity ourselves in the pews. You know, there's a quote which I sort of keep in mind. It's from a Spanish poet, Federico Garcia Lorca, and I'm probably going to get it wrong, so I apologize. But it's along the lines of, you know, there are things enclosed in walls that if they went out into the streets, they would fill the world. And I think this idea, you know, there's no complicated theology or thinking required in our faith to tell us to welcome the stranger. It's repeat that, you know, welcome the widow, the orphan, the stranger, because you were strangers in the land of Egypt. That is repeated in the Old Testament more times than any other instruction. And obviously in the old Bibles where the words of Jesus were printed in red rather than black because they were so important, in those red letters, Matthew 25, you know, I was a stranger, you made me welcome. That's ultimately the test. That's the test that ultimately come Judgment Day, we all are going to have an answer for that question. So, yeah.
Thank you very much, Danny. Back to you, Anne.
Well, Danny, thank you very much for all that you shared with us tonight and the very powerful images you've given us. I was particularly struck with that church, the ramshackle church, and the image of the little boy in the cardboard box. So thank you so much for all of that. And now, just as we began in prayer, we're going to finish in prayer. I wonder, Danny, would you like to say something about the prayer that we're going to hear now? No?
I need to be unmuted. Am I unmuted? There we go. Sorry.
You're unmuted.
Yes, it's prayer taken. I sort of found it's.
I wear the mark of your disapproval.
Yeah. It's taken from Annunciation House, which is a house of hospitality on the El Paso Juarez border between the US and Mexico, and obviously in the last 4 years they've been there for a long time, but the last 4 years they've seen their work really challenged. So this is a slightly adapted version of an American prayer, quite unflinching, quite unapologetic, and quite stark, but also undeniably true.
I wear the mark of your disapproval, and your often unspoken words pierce straight to my soul. Why didn't you stay where you belong? I feel the icy stare that says, keep your distance, you foreigner, with your different colored skin and your strange sounding speech, with your culture, food, religion, and clothing that are inferior to my own. I'm an immigrant, a migrant, a stranger, an outsider operating a sweatshop sewing machine, cheap labor, unwanted or dirty jobs are mine for the taking. I'm one of the countless invisible ones who puts fresh vegetables on your plate or stitches the fashion dresses and shirts that you buy in your stylish stores. As Moses of old once said, remember, you were once aliens in the land of Egypt. Remember that your grandfathers and grandmothers were immigrant unwanteds, were exploited, cheap labor, second-class citizens, uneducated and poor, used and abused, ignored or looked down upon for their foreign religion, speech, and food.
And now we say the final verse together. Dear God, help us to remember that when we speak of immigrants and refugees, we speak of Christ, in the one who had no place to lay his head, and in the least of his brothers and sisters who come to us again, a stranger seeking refuge. We confess that we often turn away. Amen. Right, so Danny, before you go, we'd just like to say a prayer with you and for you, which is here. Loving God, we thank you for the gift and witness of Danny. We thank you for what he has shared with us tonight. We ask that you anoint him anew with your Spirit, such that your life may be deepened within him. And now, just to finish this session, we're going to pray for each other with this blessing.
And now may the Lord torment you. May the Lord keep before you the faces of the hungry, the lonely, the rejected, the despised. May the Lord afflict you with the pain for the hurt, the wounded, the oppressed, the abused, the victims of violence. May God grace you with agony, a burning thirst for justice and righteousness. May the Lord give you courage and strength and compassion to make ours a better world, to make our community a better community, to make our church a better church. And may you do your best to make it so. And after you have done your best, may the Lord grant you peace.
And just finally, we warmly invite you to join us next week for the next in our Advent journey, when we'll be joined by Hayab, Hannah and Parisa, again reflecting on this important theme, forced like Jesus to flee. We've heard so powerfully from Alison and tonight from Danny, and we'd be delighted if you'd join with us next week. You can register in the usual way by emailing Scottish Laity Network, and we look forward to seeing you then.
And thank you, Callum, again for all you do. Couldn't manage it without you.